Hey everybody, this is Professor Alex. I'm way zoomed in. Let me back up. But hey, I'm here today to talk about Chapter 7 in the Sociology 3E textbook, and Chapter 7 is on deviance. So I'm here to do a quick recap today. Please do be mindful that watching a recorded lecture does not take place of coming to class, but I still want to do these for students who have to miss class or who would like to do a recap in their own time. And also for, of course, any other students who need help with their sociology class. So, again, today I'm going to cover Chapter 7, which is on deviance. So let me pull up my slides. Apologies for the horrible camera quality. I'm at my grandma's. This is her back room, and so we're gonna vibe out here for today. So let me see, let me share. Okay. So again, like I said, Chapter 7, Deviance, Crime, and Social Control from the Sociology 3E textbook, which is available for free via the OpenStax website. So that's lit. So anybody following along can access this textbook. Just type in Sociology 3E textbook, OpenStax, and you should have access. Love open resources. But okay, so again, today I'm just gonna go over like the basic stuff. I do always like to ask, because has anyone played Detroit Become Human, right? Because in Detroit Become Human, it's a video game and won't get too much into it, but if you know, you know. You're going after the Deviants, which are the robots that are not acting as they should, right? So deviance largely is acting, behaving, thinking outside of the norm. And I want to be very clear that this is not necessarily positive or negative innately. It really depends on the situation. And when I say it depends on the situation, I mean it depends on where you are, what time period you're there, and who's perceiving you. Okay? So, as it says here, deviance is a violation of contextual, cultural, or social norms, and it is very much kind of considered in the eye of the beholder, or relative, or subjective would be a good word as well. Um, typically when we think of deviance, we think of like negative things, like really bad things, and bad things are deviant. But there's a lot of positive deviant actions as well. So I just want to clarify and make sure that we are on the same page that deviance is not necessarily bad, but it typically is thought of as that. So another thing is that, again, context is a huge part here where something that is deviant, for example, let's say you're going to church on Sunday, talking loudly and like socializing during the service, deviant. Socializing and talking after the service and mingling with friends afterwards, not deviant. So it can be the same action, but during service, not appropriate. After service, sure. So setting and time period really play a role here. Environment and setting play a huge role through everything we're about to talk about. So, again, although like the everyday kind of use of the word deviance is typically alluding to something negative, in sociology, we're not really concerned about right and wrong. We're more so like looking at going against the norm, and we don't necessarily always see this as right or wrong because, again, what is deviant can be subjective. So, another definition that I like, a behavior, trait, or belief that departs from a norm and typically generates a negative reaction from a particular group, generally. But at the end of the day, the easiest way to think about deviance is something that is just different than what we consider to be normal. Okay. And so, kind of going into positive deviance, for example, the big thing about deviance is that it's important for social progression. We would never go anywhere. We would never have any change. We would never have any improvement without deviance. Someone has to step outside of the norm to push our thoughts on even what is the norm, right? And we see this throughout history in so many cases. And like just whatever, even like the civil rights movement, those ideas were seen as deviant, outside of the norm, but necessary for our society, right? They were seen as bad. But very helpful for a lot of people, right? So it just kind of depends. So, like for example, when you think about, let's just say fashion, right? Anything not typical to fashion that's not super popular right now would be deviant. But when we see new fashion trends, that's because someone was willing to be deviant. Someone was willing to jump outside of the box of what we consider fashion now and did their own thing and is probably unique and cool and different. And I'm sure a lot of people might be like, don't do that. But a lot of people might be like, that's really cool. I want to do that. That's the next fashion trend, right? We see somebody wear a super tiny purse, or we see somebody wear, I don't know, a certain type of bubble skirt or whatever, and all of a sudden it's a trend. But somebody needs to step outside of the box to push our idea of what fashion is, to push us and progress us forward in the world of fashion, right? And you can apply that to everything else. But my point is that we need people to be deviant to push forth what we find to be fashionable or beauty standards or whatever, right? So, and then the other thing where it gets kind of tricky is when we're looking at like social justice, right? So, when it comes to social justice, it depends on what side you're on and what your perspective is. Something for, let's say, me, who's more radical, I might see people pushing for abortion rights as positive deviance. Like, yes, we're going outside of the norm. Yes, we're going against what our society is largely saying. And so, therefore, any kind of like protest for abortion for me would be positive deviance, but for another group of people, very much would be negative deviance. And we see this through any sort of like social movement, right? BLM, MLK, like any major social movement or leader at that time was seen to be deviant, right? Even just like MLK, or we think of whatever. I'm thinking about like a bunch of just like social justice leaders, whether it's the feminist movement or movements for racial equality or whatever. Those people who stand up and say, hey, what we're doing is wrong, they're being deviant. They're going outside of what is socially acceptable. And so half the US probably sees that as negative, and half the US probably sees that as positive. So that kind of goes into the subjectivity of it, and the fact that what is positive or negative deviance is, again, to the eye of the beholder. It depends on perspective. Again, where are you? When were you there? And who's perceiving you? And I think the who's perceiving you part is really important because, for example, we could be like, oh, well, in the US in 2020, uh, this is deviant. But if you go to the US, which is very much divided, bipartisan, right, politically, let's say just say like d Democrats versus Republicans, you can say something's deviant in the US, but it's probably only deviant to half of the US. So where you are matters and when you're there matters, but that's why I say who is perceiving you, who you're talking to also matters because again, we could look at abortion rights. And if you someone from outside of the US comes in to talk about abortion rights, depending on who they're talking to, abortion rights might be positive deviance or it might be negative deviance. So it's just interesting how kind of subjective it is. Another example of that would be going into kind of like where you are when you're there and who's perceiving you. If you come to my class and you're wearing pajamas, I literally don't care. I'm glad that you came to class. I'm not worried about what you're wearing. I'm happy that you're there. But you might go to your next class after mine, and that professor might actually care what you're wearing and find it to be negatively deviant that you're wearing pajamas. So again, you can be at the same place, PGCC, the same day, and go from my class and be seen as not deviant, and go to another class and be seen as deviant based on what you're wearing. So I just wanted to really highlight the fact that even who's perceiving you is a big part of deviance. But largely deviance is just departing from the norm. Departing from the norm in a particular context, though. So, for example, In my in-person classes, at least, we do this thing called Deviance Day, where everyone has to come in and do something deviant within the context of a classroom. So I'm gonna give you a wrong example first. I had this one student who came in and she said that her deviant activity was that she had her nails painted. And she said it was deviant because her parents don't let her paint her nails. That would be deviant within the context of her household then, but that's not deviant in class. So I had to dock her some points because the point of the activity was to do something deviant within the context that we're in, which was the classroom at the time. Having your nails painted in class is not deviant. But to her, having her nails painted, period, is deviant because her parents don't allow her to. But again, the context matters. Having your nails painted in class would not be deviant, right? But there's things that you do with your friends, or you do with your coworkers, or you do with your family or your siblings, and there's different conversations that you have with these people that therefore might be seen as deviant or not, right? Like I can talk about intimate things with my friends and my siblings, but I would never talk about that stuff at the dinner table with my dad. Like, oh my God. Right? So you just have to kind of know your context and we do a pretty good job as humans understanding what's deviant in certain contexts. In terms of punishment for deviance, this really depends on the culture. In the US, I'm sure y'all know we love imprisoning people. Love imprisoning people. And going off of that, we also really like corporal punishment, which is physical punishment, right? And I even think about people who are imprisoned, right? And how the guards might beat them or might put them in solitary confinement. Like there's like torture, And so in the US, we really depend a lot on imprisonment. But some other sanctions. And sorry, let me rewind. What I mean by sanctions are things that almost confirm or deny your deviance. They either accept and push for it or go against it. So essentially, a negative sanction or a sanction. Okay, let's say that you come into class and you're wearing like a really crazy fit. Maybe it's really cool, but it's definitely deviant. It's definitely something that no one's ever seen before. I had this girl come in like kind of like full cosplay, like wearing all pink, pink ears, da da da, da, right? So it's definitely deviant for a classroom to like dress in full cosplay. And so she might receive multiple types of sanctions. She might receive positive sanctions, which might be somebody like, oh my God, girl, I love your outfit. Looking good today. Pop off. Okay, pop off, right? Like you might have someone who's like, you look good. Okay, like love that. But then you also might get negative sanctions, which does not need to be verbal. You might just kind of get a side eye from a couple students or classmates, right, who are kind of like, like, and you know when people are kind of giving you a side eye and kind of looking at you weird, right? You can feel that. You can feel that. You can feel when people are kind of like looking at you, judging you. So sanctions can be positive in terms of saying, oh, keep doing that. And that would be somebody complimenting your outfit. Or you could have negative sanctions, which could be as simple as someone giving you a side eye or scooching their chair farther away from you. It doesn't have to be verbal. They don't have to say, I don't like your outfit. But you can feel how and you can see how people are responding to your deviant activity. And again, you can receive positive and negative sanctions in the same breath. But some other sanctions, so again, I would just say sanctions are things that reinforce or decrease behaviors. Almost think of like classical conditioning a little bit. But so this is just making sure that people are staying within certain lines. Um, but so some other sanctions, therefore, like kind of punishments for being deviant might be losing your job, being kicked out of a club, suspension or expulsion from school, different fines, even just overall shame, public criticism, or social ostracism. For example, when we have a influencer on TikTok who does something bad, I'm gonna use James Charles. If you know, you know. But if you have like James Charles, for example, who has done questionable things or has some questionable claims about him doing things with minors, he might face public criticism, social ostracism, he might lose followers, he might not have people buying his makeup as much as they used to. Those are all sanctions. That's society and people in society saying, we don't like that, and that wasn't good that you did that. That was too deviant for us to accept. So again, sanctions could be something as simple as we're not buying your product anymore. Even Kat Von D. Oh, I loved Kat Von D for makeup back in like high school, and even like a little bit through college, like loved her eyeshadow palettes. But then she came out as an anti-vaxxer and she wasn't vaxxing your kid, and she lost a lot of fans, right? Like a lot of people stopped buying her makeup and they didn't want to support that cause. And so that's a sanction, is society being like, we don't like that and therefore we're not going to support you. So whatever, sanctions could be you approving of someone's deviant activity or finding a way to be find society finding a way to be like, don't do that, right? But in other cultures, you might have things such as like shunning or banishment. For example, Mormon culture, if you decide that you don't want to be a part of that religion or that religious culture anymore, typically your family will shun you. They don't want to talk to you anymore, period. Or I'm thinking about like Amish people, Amish teenagers or coming of age young adults have the option to go out and experience the real world, and then they can decide if they want to come back or not. And if they don't want to come back and they want to enter the real, I don't want to say the real world, but the real world, if they decide to do that and leave their Amish culture, they are banished. Don't come back here. You chose this other life, this material life, and we don't choose that life, so don't come back here. So, whatever, you'll see different types of sanctions in different cultures and different severities of that. Some examples of like changing of deviance, marijuana, right? Like that was seen as so deviant, like so bad, so out of the norm, so not okay. And then, we have medical tests or medical doctors who are like, this could be helpful for cancer. This could be helpful for anxiety. This could be helpful for XYZ. CBD is really good for this. This is good for pain. As we get more science and we have more studies and more research, I do kind of want to say that I think sometimes things are deviant because we don't quite understand them yet. And we have a fear of the unknown. So when there's something that we don't quite understand, we tend to label it as deviant. So when I think of marijuana, just didn't quite understand it yet. It was labeled as like a bad drug. And we hadn't really done much research yet about the benefits of it. But once we did, we were like, oh wait, there might be something good here, right? And so like that's cool. We've had a turnaround. It's now recreationally legal in a lot of states. Um, but we still have people in jail for marijuana possession, which of course is an issue that we need to very quickly figure out because essentially the sanctions are off, right? We have sanctions for people being deviant for possessing marijuana or selling marijuana, whatever, our sanctions were like go to jail, right? But now it's more accepted, so maybe we should kind of decrease the sanctions that we put on the people 10, 20 years ago, right? But I digress. I digress. We also see things with like LGBTQ queer communities. Becoming less deviant, same-sex relationships and marriages becoming less deviant. But again, I think that kind of goes back to us not understanding these relationships or concepts and therefore being afraid of them and therefore labeling them as deviant and bad because we don't get it. But as we kind of go through more research and we talk to more people and we open our minds and our perspectives, we realize that's not really that weird. But going back to sanctions, I should have kind of started here, but sanctions are means of enforcing rules. And again, that can enforce, again, let's say you come in with like a really fashionable fit, but it's unique, like it's original, no one's done it before. You might have positive sanctions from students who are like, oh my God, I love your outfit. Where did you get that from? Like, I want that too. Or just like, you look good. Or like, okay, girl, tea. But the night of sanctions, again, it could be someone like, I hate your outfit, but typically people don't do that. And my point is that negative sanctions can be as simple as a side eye or a look or a whisper, right? And you can kind of feel when people are like whispering about you or like looking at you weird, right? So negative sanctions don't have to be as deep as, oh, you're going to jail or we're going to punish you or we're going to whatever. Like it could just be something as simple as I think back to like grade school, like someone bullying you and being like, ew, like where'd you get that shirt? Like Aeropostale. Like I don't know. I love Aeropostale. I'm just saying. But then other important terms are informal and formal sanctions. So informal is more so what I've been talking about in terms of, hey girl, I really like your shirt, or whispering to your friend, what the fuck is she wearing? What the heck is she wearing? And so whatever. So informal is largely like face to face, kind of like individual, think like you're in the same room, whereas formal sanctions are formal. They're written down, they're policy, they're laws. When I think formal sanctions, I think don't murder anybody, don't essay anybody, don't break into someone's house, don't steal things, don't jack someone's car. Those are formal sanctions, right? And this is important because deviance or laws, actually, laws are codified deviance. Laws and policies are based off of things that, as a society, we've decided is so deviant in a negative way that it needs to be written down. Okay, so when you think formal sanctions, think anything written down in law or policy or the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, right? Those are formal sanctions. It's written down. There's a associated punishment. Like it's legit. Like we've decided as a country, as a society, that these things are so negatively deviant that we're not gonna do them. That's formal sanctions. Whereas again, going back to informal, you wearing like a really cool, unique, original fit to class, there's no policy or law that says you can't do that. You know what I mean? Like I even think about, for example, like I like to bring my dog to class sometimes if I can. There's no formal rules against that. Technically, there are. I ignore those though. But the informal sanctions would be more so like, let's say I brought my dog to class and then I have a student who's allergic to dogs. Right. Like at that point, that's kind of an informal sanction. Like, it's not like my boss is gonna come yell at me. I mean, let's say like let's say I bring a dog to class and there's a student who's like allergic to dogs and they're sneezing, like struggling. The informal sanction for me would be like, oh my God, that student's struggling. Like, I should not have brought this dog. I'm not going to bring my dog again. So that sanction would work, right? That student sneezing and struggling because I brought my dog. That's an informal negative sanction where, oh my God, I can see that someone's reacting negatively to this. Like, I should not do this again. And that's how sanctions work. Sanctions make you feel a way about should I keep doing this or should I not keep doing this? And so again, someone sneezing and dying because I brought my dog would be an informal negative sanction where again it's not a policy, but I can see how my students are reacting in a negative way, and therefore I should maybe stop doing this. And again, formal sanction would be more so the fact that, for example, PGCC has a rule that says you cannot bring dogs to class unless they are what's the word? Not emotional support. Service dogs, right? So the formal sanction is it's not a service dog. The informal sanction might be my student coughing up a lung because I brought in my dog. So I would get corrected either way. Again, on the other hand, deviance is important, and I'm highlighting this because this is going to be part of your write-up. Deviance is important because it also is the crux, it is the initiation of social progress. For example, okay, Black people are enslaved and treated as slaves and three-fifths of a human, and oh my God, blah, blah, blah. You don't deserve a life. You don't deserve this, that, or the other because you're less than human. And then somebody stands up and says, that's not true. That's not right. This doesn't make sense. We can't keep doing this. This is wrong. That person who did that, that first person or that first set of people who did that, incredibly deviant. You're going directly against social norms in terms of our society. It was normal to have enslaved people, like to be racist and enslave people and use an excuse that they're less than human or whatever excuse they wanted to use. Um, and then somebody had to stand up and say, this isn't right. And that person was deviant. They were probably looked down upon. They probably were facing a lot of sanctions, both formal and informal. Informally, maybe the family is like, don't do this. You're going to get our family into trouble. They're going to look at us weird. Or formally, hey, if you keep doing these public speeches, we're going to detain you, right? But realistically, we need deviance. It can help challenge people's current views. It can reaffirm social norms through punishment, and it can lead to societal cohesion through collective consciousness. And by that, for example, let's say, abortion rights, that still was deviant, fighting for that. And going to those protests as I did for a long time, um, I did find a sense of social cohesion or community and finding people who agree with me. And again, you never want to be in an echo chamber. You want to seek views that align and don't align with your own. But you can still find this sense of like community with people who believe in the same kind of deviant idea as you. And that could be as simple as feminism. Women deserve rights. Women deserve to be treated equally. That's a deviant idea. It's funny, even today, I still feel like that's a deviant idea. And so fighting for that, like you are being deviant and you are going to face positive, negative, formal, and informal sanctions for doing that. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't keep doing that. You know what I mean? So again, we need deviance for social progression, period. We already talked about positive deviance. Um, I'm thinking about, and I forget the name right now. There was like this white ally guy. I'm the worst. It was during the Civil War, or right after, and there was like a statue that they were trying to tear down. I forget of who, but this white guy chained himself to the statue so they couldn't bulldoze it down. And if a black person had done that, they probably would have bulldozed it anyway in that time period. They didn't care. But if you have a white ally who comes in and chains themselves to this important monument, now all of a sudden they're not going to bulldoze it down because there's a white person there. That's positive deviance. Like doing something really deviant, really something like against even formal policy for the good of the community or for the good of social progression. So again, positive deviance is fully a thing. So do not think of deviance as purely negative. In the colloquial way, when people say deviance, they typically are referring to something negative. But I want to be very clear that in sociology, deviance can be equally positive and negative. And the big thing I want you to remember, is this is a saying that I say to myself that's helpful, is all crime is deviant, but not all deviance is crime. Deviance is the overarching umbrella term. That means anything outside of the norm. Underneath that, we could put it into positive, negative, and neutral, right? I wonder if I can like do that on Zoom. I like don't actually know. Oh, okay, whatever. I guess I was trying to say like, okay, I don't know how to do this right now, but imagine like we have like deviance is the overarching like term. And then underneath that, we would have like positive, neutral, negative. And I wanted them to be wide, but whatever. What if we did like this? Okay, honestly, I don't know what I'm doing right now. I should just let it go. I was just trying to show like, I usually in class, what I do is I make them fill out this chart. Um, okay, yeah, no, I have no idea how to do this. What I was trying to do was just trying to, usually in my classes, I make like a chart where I'm like, okay, what are positive examples, neutral examples, and negative examples of deviance? Because you could do all three. Um, but again, if deviance is the overarching term, if we're looking at crime, crime is going to be underneath negative deviance. Okay. So it's just an aspect of deviance, and that would be under the negative one. But there's also positive deviance. There's also neutral deviance. I didn't spell neutral correctly. It is what it is. But you can also have neutral deviance where, like, again, I have my students do deviance day, where they have to do something deviant in class. And sometimes it's something really bad, sometimes it's something really good. For bad, let's say, for example, I'm thinking about examples from this past semester. On a negative deviant side, this kid, this kid played the Pornhub intro sound on his phone. The ba-bum, like, like he just, it was hilarious. He played like the intro to the Pornhub, and I was like, "You best stop that right now." Like, that is deep. That is negative deviant AF, right? Like, we need to chill. Positive deviance. I had one kid who put on a song and was doing karaoke, and the whole class started singing along. Like, that was positive. We were all kind of coming together and singing. Neutral might be like my lazy students when they put their shirt on backwards. It's not necessarily positive, it's not negative. It might be negative for the person because I feel like your tag would probably really bother your neck since it's flipped around. And someone might look at you and be like, why is your shirt on backwards? But it's not bothering anybody. And realistically, most people will not notice, right? Or wearing two different types of shoes. That's not positive, it's not negative. Someone might look at you funny, but someone might also look at you and be like, "Oh, that's kind of stylish, right?" I've had students wear two different shoes, but when they wear the same type of shoe, but just like in a different colorway, it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. So whatever. So you see people wearing two different shoes. I would put that as neutral because it's not necessarily positive or negative, or it might depend on who's looking at you. Someone might be like, "Oh, that's kind of fashionable," and someone might be like, "Why are you wearing two different shoes?" So again, it really is the eye of the beholder. It really depends, but remember that all crime is deviant, but not all deviance is crime. So therefore, any negative deviance is crime. Crime is a subcategory of deviance, but there's also neutral and positive deviance. So all crime is deviant, but not all deviance is crime. A couple theories, strain theory. So and I have to wrap this up because I feel like I've been talking for too long. But strain theory, think of strain as stress theory. Essentially this it's a crime theory, and essentially what they're saying is that if somebody, well, let me read this because I do it well. This theory addresses the relationship between having socially acceptable goals and having socially acceptable means to reach those culturally defined goals. So, what they're trying to say here is we have social goals, which is, let's be real, being able to pay for rent for your apartment, being able to buy clothes for your kids, being able to buy enough food to feed yourself, being able to pay the car note, whatever, like those basic things in the US. Um, Being able to buy formula for your baby or diapers or whatever, or food for the table for your kids. Those are socially defined goals. Um, but does the person have a socially acceptable way of achieving those goals? That's the question of strain theory. So, for example, you have a baby, but you're impoverished, possibly homeless, or impoverished, not doing financially well, right? Your kid needs diapers or your kid needs formula. You might go steal some. Do I find that to be negative? Let me be professional and not say anything. Um, but that's an example of strain theory where you're so stressed about achieving simple, culturally accepted, basic means of survival, not being able to access those, like the basics that everybody else in the society has, and therefore taking extensive means to achieve that goal, right? Um, and personally, just, in terms of me being a bit anti-capitalism, capitalism is all about profiting off of everything. Um, But at the same time, we're all worried about women not having enough babies or need to have more babies or oh my God, the population. But we can't provide formula or diapers, right? So strain theory comes in and it pretty much you can think of again, strain theory is stress theory. If you're going through enough stress and you're not able to attain basic means of survival, that might push you towards crime. That's what strain theory is. Being stressed about not being able to achieve socially acceptable goals in a socially acceptable way. You're stressed. You can't meet the goals, and therefore you do something probably a bit negatively deviant to achieve those goals, those necessary survival goals. We also have labeling theory, which I'll talk about a lot in this class, but labeling theory, I'm sure some of you have heard about this. This is also a crim theory. When you label someone as something often enough, they will become that. Not necessarily. There's a lot of nuance to this theory, lots of nuance to this theory, but it's an interesting one. So when I think about it, when I think about labeling theory, and someone labeling you as something often enough for you to actually internalize it, there's a few things that have to happen. You have to hear it enough from enough people and from enough people that you respect, right? So I had a friend in high school and his name was Johnny. And his Spanish teacher hated him. And his Spanish teacher would always be like, you suck, you're dumb, all you're ever to do is work at McDonald's, like if you whatever, like all you're ever to do is work at a fast food spot for the rest of your life. If he respected her, if he cared about her opinion, if he had heard that from like his parents or other people that he respects, he might internalize that and be like, "Oh, damn, is that all that I am?" But because it was from a teacher that he hated and did not respect, he was kind of just like, screw you, right? So it's not that just one person says something bad and now all of a sudden there's a self-fulfilling prophecy. No, it needs to be said enough times by enough people that you do or do not respect, right? But again, one person saying, oh, you're dumb and that's all you're ever going to be, that's not going to really change your life trajectory. But if your parents and your babysitter and your teacher and your friends are all saying, bro, you're dumb, like you're slow, like you're never going to go anywhere, at that point you might actually internalize it. If you're like, everybody around me that I care about is saying this. So it's nuanced. It's not like a objective, this happens and then this is gonna happen. It just kind of depends on the person. Um, but I'm thinking about this book by Victor Rios and what was it called? This book is so good. I totally recommend it. I've met him and he's great. I think it's called Criminalization of Black and Latino Youth. Yeah. This book, Human Targets, Schools, Police, and the Criminalization of Latino Youth. This book was pretty much based on labeling theory. So what happened was he followed 20 kids over the course of 7 years, and followed them to see their trajectory about what happened in school and how they turned out. None of the kids that he followed were in a gang. But a lot of them had older siblings in a gang. So what happened in the book is what we saw was that if the teacher knew that the older sibling was in a gang, they assumed that the younger sibling was as well. If you assume that that person's in a gang, you start treating them like they're in a gang. So for example, this kid is in third grade, he's coming to class and he's like, here to learn, like da 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 da. And the teacher's like, what are you doing? Carrying a shank like your older brother? And now the kid is goes home and Googles a shank. Because the kid was like, I don't, what's a shank? You know? And so it's interesting because the teacher, not his brother, the teacher taught the kid what a shank was. The kid heard his teacher say it, he went home, Googled it, and was like, oh, now I know what a shank is. And so the teachers, based off of their assumptions, based off their biases, decided this kid's probably in a gang too, so I'm gonna treat him that way. And so what happens when all of your teachers and family and friends assume that you are or are going to be part of a gang, they start treating you like that. And what happened in this particular scenario, in this particular ethnography, in this particular book, what they found was that Sometimes it ended up safer or the better decision to actually join a gang since everybody already assumed you were in one. And now you don't really have safety because people are assuming you're in one, so they're kind of at you like you're in one. So, crap, I might as well join one to have some sort of safety or community because people are already assuming that I'm in one. That's a self-fulfilling prop. That's labeling theory. That's people being like, you're in a gang, or I'm assuming you're in a gang, and therefore I'm going to treat you that way. And then that actually comes into fruition where, dang, because you treated them that way, because you talked to them that way, their only like viable option ended up being going into a gang since you already assumed that. Might as well have the safety and protection and community of a gang if you're gonna treat me like I'm in one anyway, right? So that's labeling theory. It's labeling someone as something. But I also want to say that this can go positive and negative as well. We call this, labeling theory, which has to do with self-fulfilling prophecies, right? And a self-fulfilling prophecy is, if it's said enough times, it might come to fruition. You can think of it as like manifestation if you want. But underneath self-fulfilling prophecies, we have stereotype threat and stereotype promise. I'm going to give you a simple example here to compare these. I grew up playing violin, right? So if let's say you have me and somebody else who plays violin, and my parents are like, "Oh my God, you're so good. You're a genius. You're a prodigy. Like, you're incredible. Like, you keep practicing. Like, you're gonna be great." That might motivate me to keep practicing and be great, right? Like, I might keep going. I might actually work harder because people are saying these positive things. This is a stereotype promise. This is a positive stereotype. This is them saying, "You're amazing. Yay, you're amazing." And then I might internalize that and believe that, yes, I am amazing. And therefore, I might actually become more amazing. Stereotype threat, on the other hand, would be if my parents were like, "Why do you keep practicing that thing? You're not even that good. You're never going to be that good. You're practicing for no reason. You're wasting time. Like, what are we doing here? Like, I'm spending so much money on your violin lessons. It's not even taking us anywhere." That person, again, on a stereotype threat level, is going to be like, "Well, maybe I should stop playing. If no one believes in me and no one thinks I'm good, then I must not be good or have any promise." So you can have something as simple as playing the violin, and depending on the people that you care about and respect in your life, whether you become really great or really bad might be dependent on labeling theory and self-fulfilling prophecies and stereotype threat and stereotype promise. Um, There's only three more slides I want to cover here. The first one is kind of like disenfranchisement. So, in terms of disenfranchisement, what we typically think about is restricting people's right to vote. When we think disenfranchisement, we're typically thinking about voter disenfranchisement. But when you're disenfranchised, which means that you have been priorly incarcerated or convicted and now you are out in the world, there's a lot of other different types of disenfranchisement, right? So, for example, okay, you might lose the right to vote to some degree. You lose the right to hold a firearm. You lose the right to, like, if you're to go to a custody battle for your child, if your partner has not been convicted, they have a better chance of having custody of that child. We could also talk about educational opportunities being looked down on because you have to be reported as a felon. Same with job opportunities, you have to report that you're a felon and therefore you might not get as many opportunities. Same thing with housing, like in housing applications, you have to list that you're a felon, therefore you're less likely to get the housing. Same thing with loans. You can't serve on jury duty anymore. There's a lot of things that you lose once you've been incarcerated. So disenfranchisement refers to all of those things rather than just voting. But I do have a map here. If I can figure out how to open it. Oh, don't even play with me. What does it say? Right click and shift? Oh, what if I copy link? Hold up. Hold up. Me not being prepared. Oh, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I'll find a new one. I know there has to be like 45 of these. I wanted like a map. Okay, yeah, perfect. Okay, so this is a map of voter disenfranchisement specifically. We have dark red as permanent disenfranchisement for all people with criminal convictions. Red is permanent disenfranchisement for at least some people with criminal convictions. Orange is voting rights restored upon completion of sentence, including parole and probation. Yellow is voting rights are restored for those on probation or on parole, and they have not been incarcerated in the last 5 years. Blue is voting rights restored automatically upon release from prison. So you're out of prison and you get voting rights back. And then light blue is no disenfranchisement for people with criminal convictions. So take a second to look at this, just screenshot. Well, just look it up. You can Google this. Um, but I do want to I want you to make your own observations about this and put it in the comments what you notice here. But what I will say is light blue is the best, right? No disenfranchisement for people with criminal convictions. I want you to look at who's in the light blue. Vermont and Maine. I want you to think about the demographics of who lives in Vermont and Maine and New Hampshire. I'll give you the answer. White people. Okay? So we see that when we look at states that are primarily white, predominantly white, for some odd fun reason, they don't have as strict disenfranchisement rules. So when these people get out of jail, they can vote right away. But if you look down here in the South, where the demographics are a bit different, correct? We see different rules. So I'm not saying that it's racial, but I'm absolutely saying that it's racial. So there's that. And then two other important things, the 70-30 split. This is something you can also, oh crap. I have the link here and I do have all the slides posted for you all, but realistically, this is something you could Google again. Let me see if this link works. Okay, yeah. So if you go to you can look up like 2019. The phone. 2019 crime statistics, FBI. It has to be FBI though, right? And so I would very much encourage you to go through these numbers and look at the nuances of these numbers. I think it's very interesting. And I am using the 2019 because they have not come out with a full-blown one since then. I've looked every year. I'm waiting for the 2022, 2024. Have not found it yet, so we're dealing with this, okay? But what I will show you, and I learned this in grad school, that we need to know the 70-30 split. 70-30 split means that 70% of all crime is committed by white people. The other 30% is between Black African American, American Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian, Native Hawaiian, other Pacific Islander. The 30% is not Black people. The 30% is everybody else. Okay? So if the total is 7 million, we see that 5 million are white people, and the other 2 million, wait, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So we have 5 million white people, and then we have like 3 million of everybody else. I don't know, I'm not good at numbers, but I know that 70% of arrests for everything, not for everything, but in general, 70% of all arrests in general are white people. White people commit more crime, period. Always have. It's always been white people. But we have this misconception based on media, and different ideologies based off of white supremacy that it's black people committing more crime. No, it's not. Even if we look at it proportionately, it's white people. It's white people. It's white people. So I encourage you to explore these numbers and kind of see where who lies for certain types of crimes. These are like under 18, so like that's cool. There's definitely a lot of information here that I suggest that you look into. But the big point, and this will be on an exam, is the 70-30 split. What's the 70-30 split? 70-30 split is that 70% of all crime consistently has been committed by white people. Okay, so just keep it in mind. And then that kind of brings me to my last little point on recidivism. Recidivism, you can think of recidivism as return to jail, return to imprisonment. To be honest, I kind of get confused between prison and jail sometimes, so don't, whatever. But recidivism is the rate at which people return to prison or to incarceration, whether that's jail or prison. Okay. And this is something that I think you should definitely go down a rabbit hole on because it's very interesting. But the US, first of all, has the most incarcerated people in the world, percentage-wise, proportion-wise. And we also have the worst recidivism rate in the world. That means that in the US, when people get out of jail, there is a 44% that they'll return to jail within 1 year. There is a 68% chance that they will return to jail within 3 years. And there's a 77% chance that they'll return to jail within 5 years. I'm not going to rant about it right now because I'm going to cut this off. But you tell me what that means. Why is it that we let people free? We let them go live their life and they return to jail. I'm sure you could list off 100 reasons, right? And it goes back to disenfranchisement, right? You have to report that you're a felon on every application, whether that's housing, for an apartment, for a job, for anything. You have to report that you're a felon and therefore you're least likely to get it. And so you might go back to old ways of making money, or you might be straight edge and you might be legitimately trying to create money but because you're a felon, you can't get a job that really makes much money, right? And the other two big things I want to talk about are rehabilitation and education. In the US, we do not give a crap about rehabilitation. We do not give a crap about education, and we do not give a crap about re-entry. So, for example, in Norway, their recidivism rate is 20%. Only 20% of incarcerated people end up back incarcerated. That's because they focus on rehabilitation, not punishing and isolating people for drug use or whatever, but giving them therapy, giving them coping strategies. They focus on re-entry, which is a program that helps them find a job, helps them find somewhere to live, helps them find people they can work with, helps them find therapists. So they focus on rehabilitation, education, and then reentry. The whole process is with the goal of helping them re-enter into society as a productive member. We don't do that in the US. We have an obsession with punishment. I'd be curious why y'all think that that is. I remember I was in a crim class in undergrad, like my first like intro to crim class, and he was talking about this stuff. And I was like, if we know that Norway is doing it right and they have a lower recidivism rate, then why do we keep doing this in the US? And I don't know if I agree with his answer, but what he said was, in the US, we love to punish people. I hate that answer, but there's also some truth to it because we have the research and we have the examples of other countries that have very low recidivism rates. Their people are not going back to jail. They're not going back to incarceration because they've been given the rehabilitation, the education, and the reentry resources to make sure that they could be a functioning and productive member of society. We do not do that for people here in the US. And I'm sorry, that is racial. We are going to watch 13th in class. If you're not in my class, I highly recommend you watching the 13th documentary. It's free on YouTube. I'll show it to you right here real quick. This is a free documentary that gives you kind of the history of incarceration and the racism and classism in incarceration in the US. Um, and it's 10 years old at this point, but it still stands. It so still stands. It's still so accurate. So you can go on here onto YouTube, look up 13th full feature, and you can find the whole film. I would highly recommend the first hour. After the first hour, it kind of gets into some boring legislation, but Either way, you need to watch that, so I won't get into the nuances of that. I highly recommend the film. But otherwise, I hope that I was able to clarify some terminology and some concepts for you. If you have any questions, of course, comment them. Send me an email if you're a student of mine. You can send me a DM. My professional Instagram is at Prof Alex, but not really. It's technically, I just changed it, y'all. It's at PROF because like the Alex is spelled like A13X. Kind of cute. It's fine. But you can always DM me a question. You can comment a question on my YouTube, and I will do my best to get back to you. But to my students, I hope that this helped with a bit of an overview. And of course, send me an email if you have any questions. I hope that this could help. Obviously, I hope it helps my students, but I hope if there's anyone else struggling with sociology, that this help you with your class as well. So whatever, I hope you all enjoy your night. Thank you for logging into my crappy quality video, and that's it. All right, bye y'all.